Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to go through my April wrap-up, and in general I have to say I had such a good reading month in April. I was handing out 4 and 5 stars and 4.5 stars all over the place. Of course, not everything was that great, so I will go through each and every single book that I read this month. I did read 11 books and had 1 DNF. Everything that I read was fairly short, so I was pleased with the 11 books, even though they were shorter books. So let's start with the physical books first, and then I'll talk about my ebooks. So first I read How to Survive a Horror Movie by Seth Graeme-Smith, and this was such a cute little book. It's literally, it has like all of the horror tropes from horror movies in here, like possessed dolls and objects and slashers and zombies and how to survive a vampire attack and all of those sorts of things. This was a really super fun read. It was totally silly and funny, but I had a great time. I'm so happy I picked up this book. It was just fantastic. And I found myself actually laughing out loud when I was reading some of these things, because when I'm watching horror movies and you have the parents that don't believe the kids that there's a ghost or a demon or an entity in their room, and they tell them to go back to bed and grow up and all of this kind of stuff. And you know, it was just hilarious, and I totally recommend, if you are a horror fan, a horror movie fan, to definitely pick up this book. So I gave this one 4 stars. So next up with the physical books, I read The Ghost of Baccalieu and The Ghost of Southwest Arms. And these are 2 books by Charis, who is a Canadian author and who moved to my home province of Newfoundland because she just loved the island and she loved the folklore and the stories from there. And these books are written by school students who are in the little tiny communities that are around where she lives. So she would go to schools and do presentations on storytelling, and the kids all either put in pictures or their own fiction stories, especially with the younger grades. You know, the kindergartners have such cute little drawings in this book, and then as you go up through the ages, you know, you have some fictional stories and they're writing about zombies and stuff like that. But what I really loved were the stories that either happened to the kids themselves, or, and this was so special I thought, where they were stories that were handed down from their family members. So a lot of these stories, it would start off by saying, this happened to my grandfather back in 1940 whatever, and then he told my mom, and then she told me, and then the kid would tell the story. And of course it was all compiled and edited and everything by Charis, Cotter. And there were some fantastic stories in here about shipwrecks, and you know, they would go out in their fishing boats and they would hear ghostly cries that were echoing off of the cliffs, and everything was misty and foggy, and it just had such atmosphere. And I thought this was great because that is the whole tradition of storytelling in my province, is to hand it down over time. And I just really enjoyed these 2 books, so I gave them both 3.5 stars. And then continuing on with the ghost stories from Newfoundland, this one is Screech, Ghost Stories from Old Newfoundland, which is also by Charis, Cotter. And if you don't know what Screech is, it is a Newfoundland rum, and apparently it gets its name from the sound you make when you drink it. So there's quite a story behind Screech and how it came from Jamaica, and you know, how it was bottled in Newfoundland, and the whole route that it had to go around. So if you want to hear a really interesting story, look up Screech liquor, and you'll probably get a really interesting story. So this one also has ghost stories. Some of them are actually the same as the ones in the other books, just a couple. And then other ones are told from, you know, other people around the province. Some of them are like folklore type stories in here. And what I really enjoyed was, especially if it's a legend, like the Old Hag is a really popular legend from Newfoundland, if she told that sort of story and how, you know, it happened to a particular family, after the story was told, she would kind of delve back into, you know, the history of where that story came from, or who told her the story, or whatever the case was. So it was a little bit of an epilogue after every single little story in here, and I really enjoyed that because it was kind of like getting a behind the scenes look. So, you know, like if you're watching a movie and then you watch the extras where you have the directors or the cast members talking about the behind the scenes of the movie, that was sort of the feeling that I got from this. And I liked that it had well-known sort of legends, or, you know, someone was visited by the hag, so I didn't know about this particular family's experience, but you know about the hag. It has fairies in here, and it's just fabulous. And like I said, the little epilogues at the very end were just great, and it has a situation that happened to Ms. Cotter herself while she was driving on a really barren road in the middle of nowhere, and it was so dark, and she talks about the Newfoundland dark. And it's so funny because Newfoundland is such a rural place that if you're outside of the capital city and it's nighttime, you've never experienced dark like you do in the rural parts of Newfoundland. And it was just fantastic. This book also has such atmosphere. I really enjoyed it, so I gave this one 4 stars. And I actually just realized that I missed this one. I did finish this one, so I actually finished 12 books this month. So this is Fables, Fairies, and Folklore of Newfoundland by Alice Lanin and Mike McCarthy. So this one is also on Folklore of Newfoundland, and I really enjoyed the section on the fairies because the myths and the legends and everything that has to do with the fairies and how the kids all had bread in their pockets and things you could do and things that you couldn't do, or you would be taken off by the fairies and you would come back and never be the same again. So this is another one that was really great with the legends and the folklore and all of that, and it was divided up into different chapters. So section 1 was on folk tales, and then there was fairy lore, miracles, prophecy, and witchcraft, ghost stories, which I also really enjoyed, and superstitions, cures, and weather lore. So if you're from Newfoundland or you have an interest in learning about things like this from really old places, I would thoroughly recommend getting this book. I believe it is still in print. This is an earlier edition, but it is on Goodreads, so I believe this one is still in print, and it was just fantastic, and it was super fun. So I gave this one 4 stars as well. So the next physical book that I read was Whisper Down the Lane by Clay McLeod Chapman, and I did a full review of this book on the channel. I will have it linked down below, and this is just a fantastic book. It really is. I gave it a full 5 stars. So this is a fictional account, but it sort of revolves around the Satanic Panic of the 1980s. And like I said in my review video, the Satanic Panic is really like a pet project kind of mine. I'm really interested in that era. I'm re-listening to a podcast right now that's just called Satanic Panic. It's put out by CBC Podcasts, and it's really fantastic. So if you want to learn more about this book and what I thought about it, you can click the link in the description and go see my full review. And then the next book that I read is Goddess of Filth by V. Castro, and I also did a full review of this one as well, so I'll leave a link to that one below. And this book really packs a punch. Like I said in my review, I thought this was going to be your run-of-the-mill sort of, you know, seance goes wrong, girl gets possessed, priest comes in and exorcises her, you know, the standard sort of possession story. But it went way beyond that. It's full of feminism and the power of women and how women are held back by beliefs and by religion and all of that sort of thing. Has the divine feminine. So I really get into that more in my review. So again, you can click the link below if you want to see that, but I did give this book 4.5 stars. And next up is The Mary Shelley Club by Goldy Moldavsky, and this is a brand new release, so it just came out this month, and it was also on my most anticipated reads of 2021 list. I was so excited for this book to come out, but unfortunately I DNF'd it just after the first couple of chapters. Now, I'm not sure if that's because I just wasn't in the mood for the YA whininess and angst and, you know, the whole thing with teenage kids. I don't think so, because I do read quite a bit of middle grade and YA, but there was a lot of that in the first couple of chapters. But there was an incident that happened, I believe, only in chapter 2. And it was such a small thing in relation to the story, but it rubbed me the wrong way to the point where I couldn't stop thinking about it. And like I said, it wasn't even part of the greater story, but it happened and I couldn't stop thinking about it. It took me completely out of the book. And I just kept thinking about, if this had been the opposite way around, it wouldn't even have been in this book. So I don't want to give away anything, and I'm not saying this is a bad book at all. You know, please, if you're interested, still go pick it up. Like I said, I DNF'd it for now. I don't really feel like picking it up again. I'm not sure if I'll be in the mood for this down the road or not. So it's really, really unfortunate, because I was so looking forward to reading this, and before it even got into the plot that was described in the synopsis, I just put it down. It just wasn't for me. So next up, I did a reread of Bury Me Deep by Christopher Pike, and I read this over and over and over when I was younger. I remember having this book and it was just worn out because I just kept reading it. And I am going to be doing a full review of this book. It'll be the next video that's posted, so I'm not going to go into it too much, but keep an eye out for my review of that, and I will describe all of my feelings that I felt when I was rereading this one. And next up we have Buffy the Vampire Slayer Creatures of Habit, an illustrated novel by Tom Fassbender, Jim Pascoe, Brian Horton, and Paul Lee. And this is my first novelization that I've read of Buffy. I'm a huge fan of the show and even of the original movie. As cheesy as it was, I did watch the Kristy Swanson movie before the show came out. And I have to say that I was a bit nervous, because you guys know that I did read Slayer earlier this year. That's like a sequel sort of spin-off series from the original, and it just really wasn't for me. I was not in the Buffyverse at all. It didn't remind me whatsoever of the show. But this one, so this story takes place during the time where Buffy has just come back from the dead, and her and Spike have the weird thing going on, and then Xander and Anya are fighting because of the wedding, and Willow is starting to get addicted to magic, and Tara's getting pissed off, and Dawn is just being Dawn. And as soon as I started reading this book, I was just thrown right back into the Buffyverse. It fits really, really well. You have those sort of cheesy one-liners, and just, I really, really got the feeling that this absolutely happened during that time, you know, in the show's history. And of course, Dawn gets everybody in trouble, and Buffy and the Scoobies have to come in and save the day. So I'm definitely going to continue on with these. I want to look for some more. I think they have them listed in the back, and there's some angel ones as well. But this is also illustrated. It's fully illustrated, and it has some fantastic artwork. I just loved the artwork throughout, and I really, really enjoyed my time with it. It's, you know, less than 100 pages, and you know, you've got just Buffy being the badass that she is here. So I sat down and finished this in an afternoon. I gave it 4 stars. I really, really enjoyed this, and I can't wait to read more of these novelizations. So now on to the ebooks that I read. The first ebook that I read was Anoka by Shane Hawk, and this is a short story collection, and it revolves around a small town that's sort of like described as like a Halloween capital. And unfortunately, I found that this book was a little bit subpar as to what I was expecting. It did have a little bit to do with Halloween, and it is written by an Indigenous author, and it revolves around Indigenous legends, but I found that I was left wanting more out of that, out of those 2 sort of plot points or ideas. That was the reason why I picked it up to read it. It wasn't completely bad, it absolutely wasn't, but I just found myself wanting a little bit more. And of course, you know, I liked some of the stories, didn't like some of the other ones, but overall I gave it 3 stars. The next ebook that I picked up is The Devils Mistress by David Barclay, and this is another new release that just came out, and this book was so fantastic. They wrote the antagonists in this book so well. You just had a seething hatred for these people and what they were doing to the main character. So this revolves around witchcraft in the 17th century, and it was so good. For such a short book, it had a lot packed into it. And as the story kind of was going along, I found myself really cheering on the, I guess you would call her the heroine of the book. It was so well written and the characters were developed so well. And of course, I love anything that has to do with the witch hysteria of that time period of the 1600s. And I just really felt that I was sucked into that time. I was right there with her. I was disgusted and I was mad, but towards the end I was just getting this feeling of satisfaction. It was such a good book. So I gave this one 4.5 stars, and I totally recommend all of you guys go out and pick this one up. It's a really, really good one. So the next ebook that I read was Kill the Babysitter by Stephanie Sparks, and I also did kind of a little mini review of this one on the channel. I'll leave that one linked down below as well. And I really, really enjoyed this book. Anything that has to do with, you know, a seance gone wrong or a Ouija board gone wrong, and this one has a Ouija board gone wrong and spooky kids and a fabulous twist at the end that I didn't see coming whatsoever. So really, really thoroughly enjoyed this book. It's just a little short one. I believe it's only about 120 pages. So if you want to hear more about my thoughts, you can go check out the review, and overall I gave this one 4 stars. And the last ebook that I read this month was The Trick-or-Treater and Other Stories by Briana Morgan. And I've never read anything about this author. I believe she is a very new author, and this book was fabulous. I mean, the cover on the book is fantastic, and this is another short story collection, obviously. So, you know, with any short story collection, you're going to enjoy some more than you enjoy others. But I found, particularly with the title story of The Trick-or-Treater, it was really, really great. And a lot of the stories in here have, you know, those situations where it's like, what would you do if you were in that situation and you had to choose? Are you going to do A, B, or C in order to save your own life, even if it means that you have to do something really, really horrible? So I really enjoyed, like I said, the title story specifically, but there were other ones in here that I really enjoyed as well. But having said that, there was a couple that I didn't enjoy quite as much, but for the most part, I did enjoy most of the stories in here, so I went ahead and gave it 4 stars. So there you go, that's everything that I read in April. Like I said, it was a pretty solid reading month, except for being really disappointed with the Mary Shelley Club. And like I said, I don't know if I've put it down forever or if I'm going to go ahead and pick that one up again. We'll have to see as time goes along. Maybe I'll get over that little blip from the 2nd chapter, so we'll have to see. But yeah, really, really solid reading month. There's a lot of books on here that I would totally recommend all of you guys going out and picking up. There's some really, really good stories in some of those short story collections, and of course in the case of Whisper Down the Lane, which is a full novel, that is sitting at my #1 book of 2021 so far. So I hope all of you guys get a chance to pick up a couple of these if they sound interesting to you. Please, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give me a thumbs up and leave me a question or a comment down below, because you know I love chatting with you guys. But until next time, stay spooky everybody. Bye.